Hi everybody, Jennifer Schaus here. We're coming to you live today from Washington, D.C. And thanks for joining us in our webinar series as we cover the DFARS. That's the Defense Federal Acquisition Regulation Supplement. Our webinars are held every Wednesday and Friday. They are complimentary and recorded. And you can find all of our recordings over on our YouTube channel, where we have 776, I saw the number this morning, other videos on government contracting. If you're looking for the corresponding PowerPoints, you can log into slideshare.net. You can use your LinkedIn credentials to log in over there. It doesn't cost you anything, and you can download the 700 plus PowerPoints to all of the corresponding videos. Again, both the YouTube and the SlideShare are complimentary, as well as the live version. We do have sponsorship and advertising opportunities available. In the event that somebody sent you today's registration link and you want to sign up for some of our future webinars, if you go over to our website, simply jenniferschaus.com, navigate over to the DFARS section, and as you click there, you'll notice on the left-hand side that we actually covered the DFARS back in 2021. Things have changed, both in the DFARS and in the world since then. So keep in mind that if you are looking at something from the historical recordings, they are simply that, just historical recordings, and may have out-of-date information. The 2025 schedule on the website is currently being updated, so give us until Monday to kind of bring that full speed. But everything can be found over on our YouTube channel, and there's a playlist for the DFARS. Okay, a little bit about us. We do provide consulting services for established government contractors. We work with both large and small businesses. On the small side, the clients are typically on the larger side of small. Some of the services that we provide are listed here with a primary emphasis on contract vehicles, mostly the GSA Schedule. We help companies get on. We help with modifications, audits, renewals, and everything in between, as well as the back office reporting. In the event that your company is selling to federal contractors, we do have advertising options in our newsletter. As I mentioned earlier, webinar sponsorship and event sponsorship. If you want our media kit, which has pricing in it, just drop us an email to the hello@jenniferschaus.com and we'll send you our pricing. Here's a little bit about who we reach and how frequently they open up our emails. A little bit over 38,000 subscribers, most of which are government contractors. And additional information there. Again, drop us an email if you want the media kit. Okay, we want to thank our friends over at govevents.com. That's the premier platform for posting events related to government and government contracting. Find all of our events and webinars and the recordings actually over on govevents.com. The Fairfax County Economic Development Authority has an online calendar of events and webinars in the DC metro area. You can find all of our events and webinars over on the Fairfax County EDA calendar. Tom Johnson and his team over at setasidealert.com, that is the go-to publication for small, women-owned, veteran-owned, hub zone, and 8A firms. Visit setasidealert.com for more information. We also want to thank the Virginia Apex Accelerator. They are a DoD, Department of Defense, funded organization, and they provide local training, counseling, and mentoring for aspiring government contractors, as well as matchmaking events. If you use the links on your screen, you can register for counseling, find training courses, and more. Contact the George Mason Virginia Apex Accelerator today. Now we want to thank our paid sponsors. This is what allows us to put this webinar series on at no cost to you. Our friends over at BidSpeed. The BidSpeed platform allows users to search public sector opportunities at the federal, state, and local level. Users can also find anything from a compliance matrix to teaming partners, incumbent point of contacts, expiring contracts, and proposal templates. Discover, manage, and secure government contracts with BidSpeed. BidSpeed is an official partner of the SBA's ETG Empower to Grow program. Contact BidSpeed today. C3, if you're thinking about contracting with the Department of Defense, you need to prepare for CMMC. That's the Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification. C3's suite of CMMC solutions includes C3 Command, C3 Catalyst, and C3 Core. These solutions answer the needs of every defense contractor, whether your CMMC priority is a fast defined path to compliance or you need the flexibility to manage multiple environments. C3 offers solutions. They are your partner with a deep expertise in IT, cybersecurity, and compliance. Contact C3 today. WorkPlan. WorkPlan is an online contract management and accounting tool designed for federal contractors and hosted by Amazon Web Services. Get and stay DCAA compliant, manage expenses, timekeeping, and forecasting, plus use the WorkPlan platform to manage your capture process and your CRM. Contractors can integrate their HR and payroll into this one easy-to-use solution. Contact WorkPlan today. Ateria. Ateria specializes in Microsoft Cloud licenses and services for government and contractors. Ateria provides a business advantage for Microsoft Government Cloud licensing, managed IT administration and security, as well as data intelligence services and solutions. They implement secure, compliant, and scalable solutions to enhance operations, reduce risk, and uncover opportunities. Contact Ateria for expert IT assistance. Okay, last but not least, before we dig into the presentation, we want to thank Gov White Papers. Gov White Papers is the central hub for government and government contractors to find and post content geared towards solving public sector challenges. With your free membership, you can add relevant white papers, case studies, data sheets, and more, making your content available to a wider government audience. Have the expertise but not the content? Gov White Papers can also create materials to meet your specific needs. You can join for free today at govwhitepapers.com. Okay, we are here today to talk about the DFARS Part 244, which is subcontracting policies. We've got a great speaker today, Chase Kunk. He's with our friends over at Capital Edge Consulting. Chase, I'm going to put myself on mute, turn the floor over to you, and I'll let you take it away here with DFARS Part 244, Subcontracting Policies and Procedures.
You got it. Thank you, Jennifer. Quite impressed always with your ability to speak so articulately and speedy. So well done. Thank you for having me, Jennifer and Jennifer Schaus and Associates. And thank you all on the line for spending maybe your lunch break or your breakfast break with me. Happy Friday. Yes, so I'm Chase with Capital Edge, managing partner. Will not bore you with too many details on Capital Edge. We're a firm of about 60 employees. We are built for purpose. We work with companies that do business with the federal government. That's the commonality. Large and small and everything in between make up the client base. Clients look to us in a host of capacities, accounting, finance, contracts, supply chain, and ERP, project management. So anything from generating a cost accounting standards disclosure statement to indirect rate modeling, to preparing for and navigating and recovering from DCAA and DCMA audits and reviews of business systems, to being engaged by outside counsel of clients to opine in bid protests and disputes between government prime and prime on subs on all kinds of exciting things like cost realism and allocation of pension costs. So we often joke, don't bring us to any dinner parties. We will put the table to sleep. You can reach me there at the email address. You can find us at Capital Edge Consulting through the Google or browser. And one of the areas we do a lot of work in that's relevant for today's conversation at 244 is we do help a lot of clients with their purchasing systems and to prepare them and traverse the Defense Contract Management Agency's contractor purchasing system reviews. So we'll touch on that a little bit today. Next slide, please, Jennifer. All right, there's a hot link to DFARS 244. This is a pretty important part of the FAR when we think about really no prime contractor self-performs the entirety of the prime contract. There's going to be procurement of goods and services, raw materials, widgets, subcomponents, subassemblies, etc. In fact, there's FAR clauses and DFARS clauses that obligate you to at least try to do some subcontracting, like small business subcontracting as an example. So, this part of the FAR does come alive quite a bit. And of course, since it's DFARS, it is DoD specific. And with that, we can go to the next slide, Jennifer. All right, so why is 244 so important? Well, so first and foremost, it's got the parallel at the FAR. Obviously, FAR Part 44, they work in unison. The DFARS is the supplement to the FAR, and 244 supplements 44 of FAR. So 52244-2, the subcontracts clause, is rooted first in statutory law. It's public law. It's beyond regulation. It's got statutory underpinnings. So it's one of those revolutionary FAR overhaul requirements that should not go away due to its legislative background. And so, the -2, when it's included in the prime contract, sets forth a slew of requirements around advance notice, requesting consent, securing consent, and also opens up the door for the government to review your purchasing system down there at paragraph I of the -2. But when it's coupled in a DoD contract, which is where we're going here, it provides for greater Department of Defense oversight in that procurement activity, and specifically further kind of governance of notification and consent requirements when you want to buy goods or services as applicable. 244 also establishes that 7001 clause down there at the bottom, DFARS 244-7001. It's got a slew of paragraphs within 244 providing some specificity on what DoD is going to look at when they perform a CPSR, as well as the 24 elements to the acceptable purchasing system outlined at 7001. And it also sets forth that kind of post CPSR process, whereby if one or more deficiencies or weaknesses in the system exist, there's due process for the contractor, corrective action request, corrective action plan, ACO adjudication, and ultimately either approval or disapproval of the purchasing system. And if disapproved, 244 also introduces us to the payment withhold for any qualifying contracts due to a failure of the purchasing system. So we'll get more into that here as we go. Next slide, please. All right, so 244 is not that large. It's got 4 components, or sections, if you will. General, the subcontract consent area, the CPSR, and then also commerciality. And so not trying to minimize the importance of 244, although it doesn't have a lot of words and not terribly voluminous, and once the FAR overhaul is done, it might be shorter. It does have some really high impact realities for a business. First and foremost, staying on the right side of getting that consent before you make awards to your suppliers as applicable. The DCA's audit manual tells the DCA auditor during an incurred cost audit, accounting system audit, etc., that if consent was required and you forgot to get it before making the award to supplier, that is an unallowable cost, or certainly a question cost that would have to be substantiated by you. So there's some real cost impact here beyond the payment withhold. The CPSR is again outlined here, and then commerciality. This is really the primary reference point that the DCMA commercial item group and the DCMA CPSR group points to related to your obligation to determine commerciality of when you're buying goods or services. And then, of course, undermines that obligation, and we'll get there in a moment, whereby the DoD contracting officer has ultimate authority of commerciality down the supply chain. So an interesting dynamic there. Next slide, please. All right, so yeah, 244.1 general, this can be quick. Miss Jennifer, next slide, please. So as with most, you know, the initial section of most of the FAR parts, there's going to be definitions, two kind of key definitions to highlight here. First is the acceptable purchasing system, and of course that's going to be a system that satisfies all 24 criteria found at paragraph C of the 7001 clause. You know, notably that 24 criteria is the foundation for any deficiency or material weakness that DoD assigns to your purchasing system coming out of a CPSR. Moreover, the DoD's leading group of folks, the functional specialists that overwhelmingly perform these CPSRs for any contractors that have cognizance with DCMA, ACO, DACO, CACO, Administrative Contracting Officer, Divisional Corporate ACO, that cognizance is the approvability of the system is going to ride on those 24 criteria. Those 24 criteria are then aligned to 30 subject matter areas within the CPSR. So although there's 24 criteria, today there's up to 30 deficiencies available to the contractor in a DCMA CPSR. So the 24 are kind of mapped to 30 areas instead. When I was a youngster, I had a full head of hair, and DCMA CPSR group was reviewing 54 areas at the time. So now they're reviewing 30, the 30 tied to the 24, okay? And you know, the 30 are things like adequate policies and procedures, TINA compliance, CAS compliance, small business subcontracting compliance, debarment, payments influence, FFATA, DPAS, price analysis, cost analysis, source selection, commerciality determinations, requisitioning, limitation on pass-through charges, closeout, supply chain management, and more. That's maybe 15 of them so far. So we'll move off that definition and move to the other. So DoD DFARS tells us what a purchasing system is, and it is the combination of purchasing and subcontracting. So it's really any of that supplier-facing transacting. That is your purchasing system. If you issue a PO to supplier, that's part of the purchasing system. If you issue a subcontract to supplier, that is part of the purchasing system. Even if you have distinct departments doing those POs versus subcontracts, in combination, that makes up your purchasing system for DFARS purposes. Okay. Next slide, please. All right, so we've cleared purchasing system definition and acceptable purchasing system, and we're going to look at the consent requirements as they're supplemented. So, you know, definitely take note that as we read this 244.2, you know, we got to map back to FAR 44. That also has really the baseline consent requirements, and so this is supplemental. This is additive, not inconsistent, but overlay, all right? And so it's not much, but it does tell the DoD contracting officers when they're going to solicit or make an award involving IT that is a qualified covered system or covered item of supply, the KO should be considering including consent requirements, elevated consent requirements to protect the government and the taxpayer from supply chain related risk. And so there is a definition for covered system. I gave you a couple words. It's national security system, essentially. So just kind of be aware if you're pursuing prime contracts in the IT covered system space, there may be some unique consent requirements levied upon you in performance. And then this is further supplemented by the PGI. So DoD PGI, what is that? Procedures, guidance, and information or instruction. So think of PGI as, you know, DoD's way of not worrying about the public comment process. So right when DFARS is updated in the normal course of business, we the public, we get to comment. This is a right we have. PGI, it's not regulation. It seems like it feels like it looks like it, but it's not regulation. It's PGI. It's something less. But the point is the consent requirement is further supplemented a bit. So would definitely want to pay attention relative to that PGI reference point. Again, if you're selling covered systems within the DoD framework. Next slide, please. All right, and then it goes on to tell us, excuse me, that the KO is going to review these consent requests. Think of the consent request as a package of information where other than the lowest price is going to be the basis of your source selection. So you think about your requisition comes in from PM, you go to the market, you've got a competitive procurement, you're heading this direction, you generate an RFP, and you establish a best value technical trade-off source selection methodology, okay? Whereby you're essentially reserving your right to award to other than the lowest price technically acceptable offeror. That's okay, you can do that, but keep in mind, you're ultimately leaving yourself the opportunity to pay more than lowest price. And this is not your money, right? In DoD's mind, this is taxpayer dollars. And so the takeaway here is in those best value technical trade-offs with your supply base, you're gonna wanna justify the price premium when you don't award to that lowest priced offeror. Okay, so why are you willing to spend more for something, right? Because in theory, you have two or more bids with a technical solution that are technically acceptable, but you're going to pick one apparently that costs more. Why is that a good decision? What's the business rationale to spend more? What more are you going to get? What's the greater benefit that you're realizing there? So this recommendation is not just based on this slide, it's also based through experiences with the DCMA CPSR group. In other words, this is a trend, this is a hot topic, this is an area of risk. When you're making those best value technical trade-off source selection decisions and you end up going to other than the lowest price, make sure that procurement file has that rationale and explanation. Use the word because a lot, justifying that price premium. Not even beyond price analysis, beyond establishing fair and reasonable price, but explain from a source selection decision why that premium is worth it to you and ultimately the taxpayer. Next slide, please. All right, so now we're moving into the CPSRs. Again, not a ton right here within 244 on the CPSR, but what is here is pretty important. All right, and we'll see why. All right, first and foremost, don't get it twisted. The administrative contracting officer, whoever has administrative responsibility from DoD's perspective over your business, that could be the PCO procurement contracting officer, or that responsibility could be delegated to an ACO within DCMA as an example. That person that has that administrative responsibility over your business, the DoD employee that does, is solely responsible for initiating the review of your purchasing system, okay? It's their decision whether your CPSR, whether your purchasing system goes through a CPSR, okay? They have to initiate it. If another element within DoD or other federal agency wants to initiate it, the ACO has final say whether it's going to happen. So that means the DCMA CPSR group does not decide if the CPSR is going to happen. They need the ACO backing for that to happen. All right. So Jennifer doesn't decide if the CPSR is happening. I don't get to decide. You don't get to decide. DCAA doesn't get to decide. The DCMA CPSR group doesn't get to decide. the ACO makes that decision. All right. Now, the DCMA CPSR group doesn't like this. This is what's called an inconvenient fact. They don't like this sentence, but that sentence is here. All right. DCMA CPSR group often wants to believe that they are riding shotgun with the ACO on the decision. You may not like that analogy. I think the better analogy is they're sitting in the third row of the vehicle in that decision making. ACO's in the driver's seat. All right, so that ACO who has the decision authority on the point of whether the CPSR will happen for your business, they have to assess the need. This is also at 244.301 and the parallel at 244.3. Okay, the ACO assesses the need for the CPSR when you have projected government sales in excess of 50 million. Okay, this is a projection. This is forward-looking. This is not retroactive. It's forward. It's forecasted. Does your business forecast more than 50 million in sales, not buys, sales over the next 12 months? And oh, by the way, last bullet point, it's not all government sales. It's only qualifying sales. All right. So this 244.301, all this is doing is supplementing the 25 million with 50 million. So the 25 million sits at FAR, 50 sits at DFARS. There's no other change to FAR 44.302 here. So if you read the rest of 44.302, it tells you what sales are. Sales are when you're the prime contract or subcontractor. So even if you're not the prime, but you're a subcontractor and you're selling upstream with ultimate end use by the federal government, that is a sale. Okay, so that's step one, sale. Then the question is this a qualifying sale? 44.302 answers that for us too. Actually, I think it's 44.303 answers that for us. All right, and it tells us qualifying sales are measured at the prime contract level, and it's going to be, let me restate, it's not going to be any sales at the prime contract level that are firm fixed price competitive or fixed price economic price adjustment competitive or our Part 12 commercial product, commercial service acquisition. So although sales are when you're the prime or sub, the qualifying feature for purposes of this threshold, if you will, is measured at the prime contract level. So if you're the prime contract holder and you're holding a cost plus award fee prime contract, that is a qualifying sale because it's not firm fixed price competitive. It's cost plus award fee. It's not fixed price economic price adjustment competitive. It's cost plus award fee. It's not FAR Part 12 because you can't do cost reimbursable contracting on a FAR Part 12 basis. All right, so that is a qualifying sale. All right, and this is a big point of emphasis and a heavy lift for contractors. Once they get scheduled for the CPSR, one of the initial data calls that DCMA will send is specific on this point of, it's called the contracts listing. At Capital Edge, we call it the active contracts listing. There is a distinction, but whatever. The point is, DCMA will have you fill out this spreadsheet of active contracts, and the data points you're populating tie right back to FAR 44.3 related to sales and qualifying features. Okay. All right, next slide, please. All right. So 303, extended review, additional items to include in the CPSR. All right, so this is the regulatory rulemakers telling the DoD CPSR analysts, so within DCMA traditionally, to essentially amplify their review. Don't forget, point of emphasis right here. First, review the adequacy of the commerciality determinations. Okay, so if you're going to buy a good or service and you're going to consider it commercial, you need to have a commerciality determination package in that procurement file. Okay, what this is saying is, don't just worry about the existence DCMA, CPSR group. You need to worry about the adequacy of that commerciality determination package, right? So with everything in the CPSR, and this is me talking, existence of the documentation is presumed. Like, of course you're doing your job, purchasing system within contractor. The documentation that's supposed to exist, it exists. What DCMA is coming in to do is to evaluate the adequacy of your work product. And here's a great example. DFARS tells them to focus in on the adequacy of those commerciality determination packages. Okay, and then similar, but to some extent, and this is anecdotal, and don't take it to the bank, assess the adequacy of your for DCMA to assess the adequacy of your counterfeit electronic parts avoidance and detection system. All right, so DCMA will very much look at this through the CPSR, but they are not quality assurance nor engineer types. So they will look to the DCMA quality assurance people that are in your life, if you have any, for feedback too. All right, but really the point on this slide is that first bullet, the adequacy of those CDs, those commerciality determinations. Commerciality determinations are a top 10 deficiency across industry according to the DCMA CPSR group year over year. So of 30 potential deficiencies, commerciality determinations is always a top 10. So there you have it. Next slide, please. All right. The KO, in consultation with the purchasing system analyst or auditor, must determine acceptability of the system or unacceptability of the system ultimately. If it's acceptable, we go down the path of approval. If it's unacceptable, we go down the path of disapproval. All right. What's kind of interesting to me is, and I appreciate it, if there are deficiencies in the system, the government doesn't allow you to play flat-footed. They require you to course correct and fix yourself, even if you're disapproved, right? So there really is no strategy of, and would never advocate this, but I'm not interested in compliance. I don't care if I get disapproved, and I don't care if I have deficiencies. Well, that would be one feeling, but the government's not going to let you have that mindset. They're going to come back, and come back on you. Even after payment withholds are imposed and you're disapproved and you're not winning more contracts, they're not going to let you stay disapproved. They're going to make you fix your deficiencies, and they'll keep coming back through follow-up CPSRs. That's what they're called, follow-up CPSRs. The only way to earn a follow-up CPSR is for your purchasing system to be disapproved. All right. And of course, 7001 is the guiding light, the 24 criteria to the purchasing system. This is not the 7001 session, so I'm not going to go through all 24 criteria, but 244 prescribes inclusion of the 7001 clause in certain solicitations and contracts. We'll get there here in a moment. But next slide, please. All right. So some more kind of due process here. So let's take the fact pattern forward. You've gone through the CPSR with DCMA. The exit briefing happens, and then essentially the analyst from the CPSR group will report back to their customer. Their customer is your ACO, your DACO, your CACO. All right. And then when that KO is made aware of the findings, they normally get pretty interested. And at this point, there's a material weakness. They used to be called significant deficiencies. Now, as of, 8 months ago, DFARS is updated. They're now called material weaknesses. So essentially stepping back, you go through the CPSR, you have some deficiencies. At first, they're bucketed always within the DCMA construct today as level 2 non-material weaknesses. You try to clear those deficiencies with the DCMA CPSR group after the CPSR through corrective action plans. There's a cap for each deficiency. For each deficiency that's not resolved through the cap with the CPSR group, those then materialize into draft level 3 up to the ACO. And then the ACO essentially says, hey, listen, something stinks here. It smells like there's a material weakness. Here's your initial determination. You need to respond and basically convince me, the ACO, that you don't have material weakness in the system. Okay, and that's where this kind of goes down here towards the bottom. So then the KO is going to write the initial determination, and you got 30 days to respond. After receiving that response, the ACO, although not based in regulation, just based in DCMA practice and policy, the KO has up to 30 days to evaluate your response to that material weakness threat. And then at that point, next slide, please, KO makes that final determination. That final determination is going to be one of two things. Either you're approved, right? So 7001 acceptability is met. The system's approved because there's no material weaknesses in it, or material weaknesses remain, one or more. DFARS only requires one material weakness to exist for disapproval to happen. All right, so if a material weakness remains at the end of that process we just walked through, now you're disapproved. KO notifies you of this through that final determination and requests further corrective action, essentially. You have 45 business days to respond. And all the while, your system's disapproved. And the last bullet, and this is the teeth, the ACO must invoke payment withholds for any qualifying contracts due to that disapproved business system. All right, there's no wiggle room there. If the system goes disapproved, payment withholds must be invoked for any contracts that are subject to the requirement. Loosely, any contracts that have that 7005 and 7001 clause would be in the portfolio of contracts that would be subject to payment withhold if things went south, i.e. disapproved. Next slide, please. All right, so moving out of kind of the due process of CPSR, 244 goes on. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. Goes on to kind of tell the government source selection authorities, source selection teams within the federal agencies, within the DoD construct to be aware of contractors bidding on jobs where they have deficiencies in their purchasing system. And moreover, be aware, step one. Step two is, protect the government. Determine whether that weakness in the system or weaknesses is going to affect source selection, negotiations, performance. If it does not, proceed with negotiations. But if it does, if the source selection authority backed by the KO believes that there is some real risk here, then it tells the government what to think about at least. And there's a litany of items there. Pivot away from a cost reimbursable contract type potentially and go firm fixed price or T&M or fixed price level of effort or fixed price incentive fee. Essentially move away from a completely flexible contract type. Think about how to protect the government further through any cleanse that are of a cost reimbursable nature. Maybe hold the contractor to account from a DoD weighted guideline standpoint when negotiating profit and fee, and on and on and on. Okay, next slide, please. And moreover, and more to the point, so if that deficiency does impact those negotiations, the KO elects to incorporate a reopener clause. The KO is on the hook to make it happen. So essentially, the government's willing to play ball with you and make an award to you, but they're going to want to protect itself and the taxpayer through a reopener clause. And DFARS goes on further and tells that KO, what to consider when writing this reopener clause and negotiating it with the contractor. All right. And this is not the ideal situation. Maybe you're walking away with the contract, but the government's got some reach back and reopener potential more than usual at that point. Next slide, please. All right, so mentioned it earlier, the 7001 clause, the 24 criteria to the acceptable purchasing system, is governed here as far as through prescription, right? So essentially this slide tells the government contracting officer, the DoD contracting officer, when to include the 7001 clause in solicitations and contracts. So the 7001 basic clause is going to ride shotgun with the -2 clause, FAR 52-244-2. So if the -2 is going to be in the contract, the 7001 basic is going to be there. That's the going in position, all right? Down there, last bolt on this slide is a reference point to determining when the KO in the government is required to incorporate the -2 in the contract. And remember, if the -2 is there, 7001 is supposed to be there back up top first bullet. All right. However, KO should include the Alt 1 of the 7001 clause when the contract contains the 7007 counterfeit parts avoidance detection system clause, but does not include the -2. So go to the bottom here again, bottom last bullet. If 44204 prescription tells KO, no, the -2 does not get imposed for this prime contract award, got it, then Alt 1 7001 would be there if the 7007 clause is going to be there. All right. So what's the Alt 1 for 7001? It's essentially elements 19, 20, and 21 of the 24 criteria to the acceptable purchasing system. 19, 20, and 21 of the 7001 clause is in part focused on counterfeit parts. Okay, so in those cases where the -2 is not in the prime contract, is not going to be in the prime contract, then Alt 1 for 7001 will go there, which is only the 3 elements associated with the 7007. All right, and then DFARS 7007 prescription, of course, would be at 246 of the FAR, and it essentially says it's going to be in any contracts where there's electronic parts, electronic subassemblies, etc. That would be part of performance. All right, so there's a lot of mental gymnastics on when for when the KO is to incorporate which of these clauses we've kind of talked about a bit today. All right, next slide, please. All right, so 244.4. So this is the commerciality piece. We talked commerciality a little bit earlier when we looked at that regulatory rulemaker's direction to the DoD KOs, to the DCMA CPSR analysts to review the adequacy of the commerciality determinations you generate in your purchasing system, all right? And so we'll just take that a little bit further. Next slide, please. All right, so 244.402A starts with the contractor, you must determine whether a particular subcontract item qualifies as a commercial product or commercial service. Commercial product, commercial service are defined at FAR 2.101. There are 9 definitions for those 2 concepts. The first 6 are for commercial product. The last 3 are for commercial service. And then there's something different called COTS item, commercially available off the shelf item. which is again different than commercial product, commercial service. All right, so this is that regulatory guidance to you that, hey, it's your decision whether what you're buying is commercial, okay? But then 244-402A, next sentence, one bullet down, says this does not change the fact that the government contracting officer has supreme authority to determine commerciality. In other words, you, the buying party, you could determine commerciality of what you're buying, only to be undermined and overridden later by the government contracting officer. And I've seen it in practice, and you might have too. All right. But this is a good reminder of how the DFARS is a supplement to the FAR, right? The FAR says it's the KO's decision whether what is the government's ultimately receiving is going to be commercial or not. So here it says, hey, contractor, you can determine that, but hold on, not so fast. The KO could disagree, and KO disagreement wins out on this. All right. And then 244-402A goes on. There's 3 sentences. Third sentence then says, hey, contractors, when you're making those determinations of commerciality on what you're buying, you need to exercise reasonable business judgment. You need to act reasonably. And so what that really creates right there is, what is reasonable when it comes to, have I actually proven out commerciality of what I'm buying from my supplier? What is enough commerciality analysis and supporting documentation? What is enough? Well, you got to act reasonable. You got to have good business judgment that in a reasonable manner. That is just a litmus test. Like that is subjective, right? And so when we spend time with clients, we also often talk about evaluative artifacts that end up in the procurement files being the most risky documents in the file, the evaluative artifacts, whereby essentially your buyer has evaluated something and made a decision. You know, a lot of what's in the procurement file is very binary, black and white, but evaluative artifacts are gray and they're subjective. And subjective artifacts, you know, is a target-rich environment for analysts and auditors to pick apart. All right, and so, you know, part of the regulatory rulemaking process, the revolutionary FAR overhaul, one of our clients has actually engaged Capital Edge to help rewrite the FAR. And that's what we've been working on in part. Some folks at Cap Edge have been doing that. We're hoping that client then pivots to DFARS here quickly and then engages us to help rewrite the DFARS. And I'll tell you, if I get that chance to rewrite DFARS, I'm coming here first. All right, I'm gonna help industry here. Okay. All right, moving along. 244-402B. Sorry, Ms. Jennifer. Back one slide. Yep. Thank you. It also introduces this air quotes special rule. This comes out of US code. It actually came out of a National Defense Authorization Act from a few years ago. And it essentially says what it says, that items priced under $10,000 a piece when purchased for use across multiple contracts in support of DoD and non-DoD, and when purchased are not tied to a specific contract, you can treat those as commercial products without even determining commerciality. And even if what you're buying is not even commercial. So this is, you know, Congress's attempt, and I think it's a good attempt, to, you know, essentially force DoD and force the defense industrial base to start listening to long-standing regulatory reform, which is go buy commercial whenever you can. We, the legislative branch, believe that there's a lot more opportunities to buy commercial than currently being taken advantage of. This goes back to the Federal Acquisition Reform Act, Streamlining Acquisition Reform Act from in the 80s through many NDAAs since. This is a good attempt by the legislative branch to help your purchasing systems buy more commercial, encourage you to buy more commercial, and to help lessen the burden of determining commerciality. Because again, it's an evaluative exercise that takes time and money, especially if you're trying to do it right. Okay. All right, next slide, please. All right. So the 7,000 clause, this was recently updated. I want to say November of 24. Don't quote me on that. I could be off, but I don't think I am. So first, 244-403 is the prescription guidance. So this is the language telling the government contracting officer when to include the 7,000 clause, which is all about commerciality, okay? And it basically says, included in all solicitations and contracts, including FAR Part 12, prime contracts, okay? So then once it's in the contract, what does 7,000 say? Well, this is more good news for your purchasing systems, essentially, right? This funnels straight to your purchasing system. All right, and then moreover, this is very beneficial to your supply base. And because it's beneficial to your purchasing system and then the supply base, all that goodness does flow back up to the government and the taxpayer. And so here it is. It says, do not do it. Do not include any FAR or DFARS clauses in subcontracts for commercial products and services unless. So that's a condition antecedent. I went to law school a long time ago, slept through some of it. But they're essentially, in contracts law 101, we learned there's condition precedent and condition antecedent. And that's the latter piece here. So essentially, do not flow any FAR, DFARS clauses down when you're buying commercial product service unless. That unless is that condition. Unless, so for DFARS, unless the other DFARS clauses in your contract specify they are to be flowed down for commercial product service. So you scour your contract with DOD, Section I, and you got a litany of DFARS clauses. Which of those DFARS clauses expressly require flow down when buying a commercial product service? Okay, so you don't flow down any FAR, DFARS clauses to any subcontracts for commercial item, period, comma, unless, and we just covered DFARS. Now FAR, for FAR clauses, you do not flow any FAR clauses down to supplier when buying commercial product service, unless the FAR clause in your contract, and there's gonna be many of them, right, is listed in 12.301, which is simplified acquisition section, or it is so specified in FAR 52.212-5, paragraph E1, which of course 212, that's a FAR Part 12 prime contract, so that's different than FAR 15, right? Or it's delineated in 52.244-6B1 is what the DFARS says still today, but guess what? It's wrong. It should say paragraph C, not B as in boy, but C as in Chase. All right, if you go to 244-6, C as in Chase, you'll see about 20 FAR clauses and executive orders delineated right there, okay? So that's the entirety of what you're supposed to be flowing down to your suppliers when you're buying a commercial product service. All right, next slide, please. Excellent. I think we've covered it all. Jennifer, I tried to talk as fast as you and as articulate as you. I failed, but I did my best. So thank you so much for having me today. There's my email address if anybody has any questions. I thank you all for listening. Thank God I wasn't on video. My mother always told me I have a face for radio. So thank you all.
Good stuff, Chase. Excellent presentation. Great coverage of some dense content here in the DFARS, but I thought you hit a home run here. So thanks again for taking the time to present, but also I know that it takes time to put together these slides. and in regards to make sure that you haven't missed anything, and I don't think you did. So thanks again for joining us, and thanks to everybody who took time out of their day. Today's recording will be available in about 24 hours over on our YouTube channel. If you subscribe, it doesn't cost you anything, and you'll be alerted as soon as the webinar is uploaded. In the event that you are listening to this on our YouTube channel, give us a like, leave a comment. We would love to hear from you. Again, if you've got questions, please reach out to Chase. He's very easy to work with and obviously has a good command of the content here. Thanks again, everybody. We'll pick up next week on Wednesday and Friday as we continue in the DFARS coverage. Have a great weekend.
Thanks again.